A group of tourists in Alaska stumbled upon a massive, hairy object lying on the ground during their exploration. The sight of the 10-meter-long entity sent shivers down their spines, but they were beyond scared straight when they realized what it really was. They knew they had to call 911 as soon as possible. That thing they had found was most certainly a mammoth, but it didn't look anything like they had thought it would. "Wait, are you sure that we have to call the police?" one of the tourists, a man named Caleb, asked. Harriet, however, had already dialed 911 and explained to the officer that they had found the remains of a mammoth. The officer straight up laughed at her when he heard this, but she didn't give up. "I'm serious, it must have melted out of the ice or something, but I'm telling you, I'm looking at a mammoth right now. You have to send someone over." The officer explained that the entire area had been searched and assured her that any mammoth remains had already been found and excavated, but Harriet persisted. Finally, the officer reluctantly agreed to contact a local glacial recovery unit to investigate the matter further. They were all really curious about what the glacial recovery unit would tell them. What kind of mammoth was this, and if, as the officer had told her, the entire area had been excavated already? How did this mammoth end up here today? But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. Finally, they heard a loud noise and a truck arrived, coming to a halt a few feet away from them. A man stepped out of the truck, and Harriet approached him, stretching out her hand to greet him. "Hello, I'm Arnold," the man introduced himself, and he explained that he was a glacial archaeologist. However, he failed to finish his sentence as Harriet and the group moved away from the mammoth, and he finally laid eyes on it. What is that?" Arnold exclaimed, and he hurried toward it to get a closer look. He knelt down next to the mammoth and inspected it in silence. As Arnold stood up again and brushed the snow off his gloves, Harriet walked over to him. "Well, what is this thing?" she asked, and Arnold's reply shocked her. "Miss, I'm afraid I can't tell you. You should never have seen this." "I'm afraid you have to come to the station with me." Arnold pulled out his phone with a sense of urgency that was almost palpable, casting quick glances at Harriet and her friends. Harriet tried to catch bits of the conversation, her heart racing with each muffled word. Arnold's demeanor told them this was no ordinary find, and his secrecy only fueled their unrest. After ending the call, Caleb stepped forward, his curiosity getting the better of him. "What's so special about this mammoth?" he asked, but Arnold's lips were sealed. Finally, Arnold pocketed his phone and addressed the group. His tone left no room for argument. "Get in the car, now," he commanded. The drive was tense, with Arnold focused on the road, and the group sitting in uneasy silence. Harriet glanced at her friends, their faces a mix of fear and fascination. What awaited them at the station? Would they be in trouble for their discovery? Climbing into Arnold's truck, the tourists exchanged glances, a silent agreement passing between them to stick together, no matter what. As the truck trudged through the snow, Harriet watched the sight disappear behind them. The mention of a cleanup crew lingered in her mind. The journey's silence felt louder than any words. Silence enveloped the group, a heavy cloak that none dared to lift. Harriet tried to meet Arnold's eyes through the rearview mirror, searching for any hint of what lay ahead. But his gaze was fixed, revealing nothing. The snowy scenery outside mirrored their internal desolation, cold and untouched. The building they pulled up to was as nondescript as they come, gray, almost blending into the sky above. A man, presumably Arnold's colleague, stood waiting. His expression was unreadable as he gestured for them to follow him inside. Harriet felt a knot tighten in her stomach. The building's lack of signage or identification added layers to the mystery. What place was this, hidden away from prying eyes? Inside, they were ushered into a small. From their makeshift prison, the tourists could hear Arnold and his colleague arguing in hushed, urgent tones. The muffled words were indecipherable, but the tension in their voices was clear as day. What were they disagreeing about? Curiosity got the better of Harriet. She pressing her ear against the cold wood, catching snippets of a conversation that sent shivers down her spine. "Indefinite stay," one voice said, a phrase that echoed ominously in the silent room. They weren't guests here, they were prisoners. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. Harriet hurried back to her chair, her movements quick but silent. Their adventure had turned into a nightmare. What did indefinite stay mean for them? Were they ever going to leave? Questions swirled in their minds, but fear anchored them in place. The door swung open and Arnold entered with his colleague. Their faces were grave, their eyes avoiding the tourists. Arnold's gaze locked onto Harriet, sharp and probing. "Walk me through it," he said, a command more than a request. Harriet recounted their day, her voice steady but her hands betraying her nerves as they twisted together. "Your camera, please." Arnold's hand was outstretched, waiting. With a hesitant breath, Harriet passed it over. He flicked through the photos with a meticulousness that felt invasive, each image scrutinized, dissected under his unwavering focus. The room felt smaller, the air thicker, as Harriet answered question after question. Arnold's inquiries circled around, painting their adventure in strokes of suspicion and concern. The door shut with a definitive click, sealing Harriet in a room that felt both too large and too empty. Across the hall, Caleb stood, a solitary figure, under Arnold's scrutinizing gaze, as the photos he'd taken were displayed one by one on the screen. Arnold's fingers paused over a photo, his brow furrowing before he pressed the delete button. Caleb watched, a silent protest in his eyes, as each image vanished. This mammoth wasn't just a find, it was a secret, one that Arnold seemed determined to keep under wraps, no matter the cost. Earlier, on a hunch, he had uploaded them to a cloud service, a digital lifeline now proving its worth. Caleb prodded, his questions sharp, aiming for the chinks in Arnold's armor. But Arnold deflected every inquiry with a practiced ease, a wall of silence against Caleb's siege. Back in their temporary cell, Caleb found Harriet, her anxious gaze meeting his. Words tumbled out, a flood of doubts and discoveries. The realization hit like a physical blow, their confinement no longer just a precaution, but a prison. Caleb faced Harriet, his expression grim. Under the dim light, Caleb and Harriet huddled together, voices low. "When they come for us, that's our chance." That moment would be their lifeline, their fleeting shot at freedom. As the lock clicked open, Caleb's muscles tensed, ready. The door swung inward, and he sprung into action, slipping through the gap with a dancer's grace. A quick shove against the door, and his foot wedged it open. A sliver of hope held ajar. He cast a last look at Harriet, a silent promise before melting into the shadows of the corridor. Left behind, Harriet turned to the figure that entered, a newcomer, eyes wide with confusion. Quickly, she spilled the essence of their plight. Caleb's daring move distilled into urgent whispers. "He's looking for a way out, for all of us," she explained, the weight of their situation pressing down. Caleb's footsteps were silent as he slipped into another room, a space cluttered with screens and papers. He found a laptop, its screen a gateway to the answers they needed. With a few deft clicks, Caleb breached its defenses, diving into the digital depths for truths hidden in shadow. The laptop's files spilled open under Caleb's skilled navigation, revealing layers of confidential memos and reports. Digging deeper, Caleb's fingers flew across the keyboard, uncovering files that sketched the facility's true intentions in stark, unyielding strokes. The screen flickered with evidence of projects wrapped in euphemisms, the reality behind them chilling. Caleb's pulse thundered in his ears as the pieces fell into place, the enormity of their situation dawning on him. Hands shaking, Caleb captured screenshots, documenting the evidence of their dire predicament. With a deep, steadying breath, Caleb prepared to return to his friends, armed with the urgent truth. Caleb's return was a blur of motion and whispered urgency. "We have to leave now," he breathed out, his eyes wild with the gravity of their situation. The plan was simple but desperate. Flee before their captors realized they were missing. Under the cloak of dimming light, they navigated the complex's maze-like corridors, hearts pounding in unison. Arnold's truck, parked and unsuspecting, became their unlikely escape vehicle. They left the facility behind, a shadowy monolith against the twilight, harboring secrets they were now privy to. The crack of gunfire shattered the tense silence, Arnold appearing as if conjured by their fears. The sight of him, weapon in hand, firing with a grim determination, was a visceral reminder of what they knew, what they fled. His truck, a menacing specter in the rearview mirror, was a constant reminder of the stakes. They wove through the Alaskan wilderness, the chase a high-stakes dance with fate. Each shot, aimed with deadly intent, threatened to end their desperate bid for freedom. With Caleb's hand steady at the wheel, they darted and weaved through the labyrinthine forest paths, a dance of shadows and moonlight. Finally, the roar of Arnold's engine faded, swallowed by the dense Alaskan wilderness, granting them a precious, fleeting moment to catch their breath and confront the reality of their escape. Hidden by the cloak of night, Caleb turned to his friends, his face illuminated by the dim glow of the dashboard. The urgency in his voice cut through the silence. "What we found, it's bigger than us," he began, his words heavy with the burden of truth. He spoke of the facility's chilling projects, of secrets so dark they threatened to swallow them whole. The stakes of their flight became painfully clear. Caleb paused, gathering the courage to reveal the heart of the mystery. "The mammoth," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. It was no relic of the past. It was an experiment, a creation of genetic manipulation gone too far. The revelation hung between them, a testament to the length some would go for the sake of science, disregarding the bounds of ethics and morality. With a few clicks, Caleb brought the evidence to light, the screen casting eerie shadows on their faces. After Caleb finished, nobody spoke for a long moment. They just looked at each other, feeling scared and really upset. As the sun peeked out, they all felt a change. With the screenshots and files they had, it was like they were carrying a big secret, one that could change everything. They hit the road again, but this time it felt different. They weren't just running away, they were on a mission to tell the world about the bad stuff happening back at that facility. Coming back to the real world felt weird. They went straight to the cops and showed them everything. All the proof they had. At first, the cops were like, "Are you for real?" But the evidence was too strong to ignore. It was scary, but also kind of exciting to think they were actually making a difference. Suddenly, they were everywhere, on TV, online, and in the papers. Everyone was talking about them, calling them heroes for standing up to the scary stuff the facility was doing. News broke out fast. Arnold and his team were arrested. Watching the news, the group saw the facility they'd escaped from, surrounded by police. "They're shutting it down," Caleb whispered, a hint of disbelief in his voice. It was real. Their actions had led to this moment, bringing down a place that was doing so much wrong. Sitting together, watching their story unfold on social media and TV, they shared a look of amazement. They'd set out for an adventure, but they ended up changing the course of a story much bigger than themselves. In the end, their story was more than just a thrilling escape. It was a lesson in the power of standing up for what's right,